Recording has been started.
Good morning, everyone in United States. Good evening to our guests from Taiwan and folks joining from rest of the world. My name is Dr. Adityanjee, and I am the President of the Council for Strategic Affairs. And today, we have a roundtable discussion on behalf of Council for Strategic Affairs. The topic is Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow. For sake of record, today is Saturday, April 8th, 2023, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those of you who registered probably saw our flyer with our distinguished panelists. Their pictures are up there. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. The Council encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in all forms worldwide, and CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. A little bit about our activities. We do a monthly roundtable discussion that is held on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime. We have a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month. CSA also organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. Council promotes publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects, and CSA has a summer internship program. The topic for today's roundtable discussion, sadly, is very, very important and contemporary. When Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022, the settled wisdom was that the war would be over within 1 week. President Putin would thump his chest once again and Zelensky government would be toppled. However, it did not happen that way. The nationalistic fervor in Ukraine, coupled with military support from EU and NATO countries and financial aid from the US, has drained Russian resources, albeit at very heavy cost of lives for both Ukraine and Russia. President Zelensky has managed to ruin his country while playing to the audience in the West. Keeping this contemporary scenario in mind, what would be the impact of statement on Xi Jinping, who was planning to invade Taiwan? Will Xi Jinping learn from Putin's folly and would be wiser in not invading Taiwan? Or will he get emboldened further and make stronger plans for the eventual invasion of Taiwan at a later date? We have a very strong panel of experts who will discuss varied future scenario about possible communist Chinese invasion of Taiwan. For sake of record, that shows you the island of Taiwan, shows you some of the war preparedness activities. In today's formal discussion, each panelist will be given 2 minutes opening statement. This will be followed by a moderated discussion with the panelists. Subsequently, we will have each panelist give a 2 minutes closing statement, and there will be some questions and answers afterwards and closing comments. So as I said, we have a very strong panel. Our first distinguished panelist is Professor Sen Nieh. Professor Sen Nieh is a prominent Taiwanese American and scholar. His research areas of interest include energy systems, combustion engineering, thermal science, multi-phase mechanics, and environmental energy. He is professor of engineering at the Catholic University of America. He has been recipient of various lecturership awards from United Nations, Charles Carman Teaching Excellence Award at School of Engineering, honorary professorship at 6 universities in Taiwan and mainland China. He initiated and served as sole principal investigator of 20 government industry-sponsored research projects with total funding exceeding $3.5 million. He's a tenured professor. He has served as 5 terms over 14 years as the chairman of Mechanical Engineering Department at Catholic University of America. He has been an active advocate and speaker on religious freedom, human rights, and China affairs, and also is a dedicated community leader involved in volunteer services. We are very glad to have Professor Sen Nieh come back to us on CSA platform. Our second distinguished speaker is Mr. Vijay Sazawal. Dr. Vijay Sazwal is a policy analyst on matters related to South Asia, especially on Kashmir. His professional capacity, he worked closely with the United States Government of Energy, Department of Energy, US State Department, and US Department of Commerce on matters relating to safety upgrades of the civilian nuclear reactors in the former Soviet Union, and extensively dealt with the Eastern European countries and their governments like in Russia, Ukraine, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria. He regularly attended annual general conferences of International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna and was member of Civil Nuclear Trade Advisory Committee of the United States government during Obama and Trump administrations. And he is the only Indian American to hold such a position. He has had very high level of secret security clearance from United States Defense Department. He is currently retired and spends his time between his residences in Maryland and Florida, and I have been fortunate to serve as a co-panelist with him on other forums. Our next distinguished panelist is Ambassador Professor Pradeep Kapoor. Now, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor is author of Amazon bestseller book Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic, Envisioning a Better World by Transforming the Future of Healthcare. He has received 2020 IAPC Excellence in Literature Award and 2020 Raymond Aron Group Health for All Award for his latest work. He is an acknowledged luminary diplomat with distinguished career, working closely with heads of governments, heads of states, and other global leaders and policymakers in different continents of the world, whether Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, and South America. He has been an educator and has taught at various prestigious universities, including Sorbonne University in Paris, IIT Roorkee, MDI in Gurugram in India, Georgetown University, University of Maryland College Park, visiting scholar at GW. He is a proud alumnus of IIT Delhi with BTech in Electrical Engineering and MTech in Systems and Management Studies. He is currently working as an international strategic advisor to Intellect Design Arena, Inc., Executive Director of Smart Villages Development Fund, involved in various capacities in international groups and organizations. He is invited regularly as a commentator on national TV channels for geopolitical analysis, is the author of many articles and books, and speaks fluent French and Spanish besides various Indian languages. We have been very fortunate to have him come on our CSA panel several times, has been a distinguished speaker as well as panelist, and he is also serving on our advisory board, International Advisory Board. Our last distinguished panelist is Dr. Professor Alan H. Yang, who is joining at this time at 10 p.m. from Taiwan in Taipei. Dr. Alan Hao Yang is the Executive Director of Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. He also serves as Deputy Director of the Institute of International Relations and Executive Director of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at National Chengchi University in Taiwan. He teaches at Graduate Institute of East Asian Studies as a Distinguished Professor of Southeast Asia Studies and offering courses related to regionalism and Sino-Southeast Asia relationship. He has engaged in Track 2 diplomacy in Asia Pacific. He was Executive Secretary and Executive Director of the Secretariat of Taiwan Participatory Group to the Council for Security Cooperation in Asia Pacific between 2010 and 2018. He was awarded the SUSI Fellowship from the U.S. Department of State in capacity of Professor of U.S. Foreign Policy at Department of Political Science, University of Florida in 2011. He has been involved with various South Asian universities, East Asian universities. He was nominated as Senior Fellow of George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S.-China Relations in U.S. since 2021 and a non-resident Fellow of China Desk at Reconnaissance Research in Kuwait since July of 2021. He has published more than 80 journal articles on China-ASEAN relationship, international relations of Southeast Asia, security governance. He has been widely published, widely traveled, and we are very fortunate to have Professor Dr. Alan Yang join us from Taipei in Taiwan, where it is 10 p.m. right now. A few of the housekeeping rules. I would request all our audience members to keep themselves on mute to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed speaker. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to pose questions. We will not encourage anonymous questioners. All the questions are moderated and have to be sent through chat function. Please ask very specific questions. Lastly, we will be recording this event on our YouTube channel. So it will be available fairly soon, within next 24 hours on our YouTube channel. As I stated, each of the panelists will get 2 minutes for an opening statement. I would request all the panelists to keep to the timeline so that we finish in time. And it is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Sen Nieh to start with his opening statement. Professor Sen Nieh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. It's my pleasures and honors to join this very distinguished panelist. I'm originally from Taiwan. Last year, I visited Taiwan twice for a total of 3 months and paid attention to the influence of Ukraine war and the COVID pandemic on Taiwan. Although the media in the US and the world and Taiwan talks lots about the Ukraine-Russian war and possible CCP's invasions to Taiwan, it sounds like the war, the dangers and the death and terrible life-changing are coming soon. My personal observation told me the opposite. The rewinding news reports urge of politicians and military preparations seems to have little effect on everyday life of people, the economy, and the society. People there are generally calm, worry less, and mostly happy. Just last weekend, for example, one of my friends in Taiwan told me his family went on a tour to a nearby sightseeing place crowded with people, and he couldn't even find a parking space. Another friend went to a restaurant with families for dinner and had to wait a long line almost an hour to get in and sit down to order. The society
You are muted, sir. Please unmute yourself. You got muted.
Sorry, it come out. So the business as usual. People in Taiwan may have different opinions and emphasis on the ideology of unifications or independence, or on keeping how close to the United States versus China. But the consensus is that no one wants to live under communism. The troublemaker is the CCP. People in Taiwan are happy to keep the status quo, and most want to strengthen the national defense to secure peace across Taiwan Strait, to protect the freedoms, democracy, and the way of life enjoyed for many decades in Taiwan. Communist China under Xi Jinping is quite different. Although in his third terms of powerful ruling, Xi Jinping built up its military powers further, bluff in public speech internationally or to the brainwashed Chinese people as always, and waged the war across the Taiwan Strait. But China's economy and the pandemic have been terribly bad in the past 3 years. The society become very unstable, with intense frustration of people, from young people such as white paper revolutions to old people, white hair revolution. And its wolf warrior diplomacy led to further isolation and even pre-Cold War in foreign relations with the United States, EU, country of South and East Asia, and the free world. For example, the employment rate in China has been record high. 70% of college graduates of 10.7 million last year cannot find a job, either staying home with parents or wandering around the city and the society. For example, the 37,000 job opening in the various government levels this year, there are more than 2.2 million applicants, 60 times more than the job openings. Another example, for the first 2 months of this year, the business of China, the best, Zhujiang Triangle, Guangdong Province, and the second best, Long River Triangle, Shanghai area, have dropped to 27%, a quarter, as compared to last year, which wasn't good either. The top 40 big real estate companies cannot sell out the houses, with a net total loss of 24 billion US dollar last year.
Professor, can you conclude, please?
Okay, for the largest top company, 碧桂园操控控股, its revenues dropped to 65% over the last year, which was not a poor year either. I stop here. I have more comments as the Q&As proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nieh, for your opening statement. Now it's my pleasure to invite Ambassador Professor Pradeep Kapoor to give his opening statement. 2 minutes, please, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. And I really appreciate the efforts taken by CSA and the entire team to set this session up. What I wish to say is more in a holistic way. As I see the world today, you have put the poser, Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow, question mark. Now, what I see today in the world stage is that recession is looming large on the global platform. There is inflation, there is hyperinflation. Countries are failing. I mean, Pakistan is almost a failed state. Sri Lanka failed earlier. Banks are failing. Big international banks, US banks. Many banks are in the risk of failure. Prices are shooting skywards for energy, for groceries, for all items, getting out of reach of a very large population in the world. The security situation is deteriorating significantly. COVID had already impacted a very large portion of the world population, which we had also discussed in our book on post-COVID, beyond COVID, envisioning a better world by transforming the future of healthcare. And COVID is staging a resurgence in many countries again. Now, when people thought that it was brought under control, the Bretton Woods institutions, including the World Bank and IMF, are under question. Their leadership is under question, whether it should continue with the Western world or there should be a more equitable representation at the leadership level in these institutions. The efficacy of the United Nations is absolutely under very serious question mark. Reforms have not happened for a long time. It is proving to be an ineffectual organization. The organs of the UN
You are muted, sir. Kindly unmute yourself.
the organization, I don't know where it got muted. So the UN, I was saying, its entire existence, its efficacy, its functioning is under question mark. Reforms. The UN organizations like WHO have proved themselves to be quite incompetent in dealing with the problems facing the world. And in this mix now, with the Ukraine-Russia war having started more than a year back, the grain situation in the world, the wheat situation in the world, the bread situation in the world, plunging into very negative territory, I throw into this very volatile mix of the world situation today, Taiwan PRC war taking place. I don't know what happens thereafter. It's a very big question mark for all the thought leaders in the world to ponder upon. China's dreams of becoming a global hegemon is, I guess, going to be just a dream for the next maybe few centuries. It's not going to happen at all, or it's already history. As has already been mentioned by one of our distinguished panelists before me, that the serious economic situations that they are facing internally are only going to multiply. I will stop here, Dr. Adityanjee, and come back later with further comments. Over
Thank
to you.
you, Dr. Kapoor, for your opening statement. It's my distinct honor and privilege to invite our guest, panelist from Taiwan, Dr. Ellen H. Yang. Dr. Yang, please unmute yourself and give us your opening statement.
Namaste, thank you, sir, for your kind invitation. And am I clear?
Yes, you are.
Okay, since I have only 2 minutes, so I will try to be very brief. First, I would like to share my key takeaway. The first point that I would like to make is I don't think that today's Ukraine will 100% happen to tomorrow's Taiwan, because in all subjective and objective conditions, Taiwan is not Ukraine, and it is difficult to make an analogy. However, the lessons of Ukraine are valuable to Taiwan, so that Taiwan can be well prepared for its lesson. The challenges facing Taiwan and Ukraine, I would say, are similar, including the following 3 points as my key takeaway. The first one is both countries are embedded in the asymmetrical power structure, and both countries face the oppression of neighboring major powers, as well as the strongman with little control. So the strongman with little control is the highlight. Second, the neighboring power have strong intention to seize both Ukraine and Taiwanese territory, and both of Russia and China wield coercive means to threaten their neighbors' sovereignty, that is Taiwan and Ukraine. Russia is very close to Ukraine. This ongoing military warfare proves that Russian troops quickly enter Ukrainian territory, by land. But the situation on the cross-strait scenario is very different. Just as I mentioned, today's Ukraine will not be 100% happen to Taiwan in the near future. Although Taiwan and China are neighboring countries, there is the Taiwan Strait as a body of water in between, making it difficult for the Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA, to invade easily. However, Taiwan is still under severe military extreme pressure, just as my distinguished panelists mentioned last year. For example, when the U.S. House Speaker Madam Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August 2022, PLA launched more than 10 missiles to conduct the blockade military exercise around Taiwan, and 4 of that missile have been falling into the EEZ of Japan. And more recently, actually, it's just in these days, China conducted military exercise against Taiwan to strengthen the so-called law enforcement and the elusive jurisdiction over Taiwanese waters. And they try to normalize these exercises to intimidate and coerce Taiwan, as Taiwan's President Madam Tsai Ing-wen, visited our ally and also paid a formal transit and visit to the United States. And the third point is international attention and support are extremely important. NATO and the United States are deeply influential and involved in the Ukraine issue, while on the Taiwan issue, the role of United States and Japan is quite critical and important. Moreover, while NATO and EU countries have developed their own Indo-Pacific strategy, the stability and peace of the Taiwan Strait is of course in their interest. And China often uses the term new normal to justify its coercion and distorted behavior. And this is something that I would like to raise the public awareness studies. If we all agree to the new normal interpreted by Beijing, we would be assisting China in exporting its injustice projection. The international community, especially the democratic, like-minded country, should have the courage to defend the rule-based international order and directly reject China and Beijing's unjust new normal. I think I can stop here for the opening remark.
Thank you, Dr. Yang, for your opening statement. Now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Vijay Sazawal, who is our 4th panelist, to give his opening statement. Please confine yourself to 2 minutes, please, and kindly unmute yourself. You are muted.
Thank you, Adityanjee. Thank you to every panelist. I heard you all carefully. We are addressing 2 global conflicts here, one underway and other presumably on the horizon. What are the differences and what are the similarities? Both are outcomes of the geopolitical changes in the last century. The former can be traced back to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, 2 years after the Berlin Wall fell. This later is a result of the Communist Party takeover of the mainland China in 1949. Both have a common entity that controls the narrative and complexity of the issues, that being the United States. At least until now, and possibly in the US, in the future, the US will continue to retain its hegemony, but the Ukraine conflict is altering the global geopolitical landscape, and the emerging situation may become very volatile and harder to predict. China is beginning to make its mark globally, and it is an expansionist power. It wants Taiwan, and it wants a lot more. The other one thing that is very, very clear is that challenges brought about by the Ukraine conflict will cast a long shadow on the especially in the case of the Taiwan conflict. The American establishment feels that Ukraine and Taiwan are front lines of the global challenge to reassert the existing global order. Americans have brought about unity in the European theater and is clearly leading the charge against the Russians in Ukraine. Many Western political strategists believe that haphazard withdrawal from Afghanistan by America encouraged the Russian decision to invade Ukraine. Americans also believe that there will be a struggle to keep the peace in Asia if they do not win the war in Europe. China understands that. That is precisely why the Chinese have entered into the picture by announcing their peace plan for Ukraine. They do not wish to see Russians lose in Ukraine, and in fact, they see Ukraine conflict as the opportunity to assert their global leadership and lay foundations for a new global order. Absorption of Taiwan into China will be a catalyst in the new Chinese vision of the global leadership, just as Sun Tzu strategized in The Art of War. A good leader turns chaos into an opportunity, but a great leader subdues enemies without fighting. I believe President Xi has a plan to be the great leader. It was Dr. Kissinger, the Grand Master of the Realpolitik, who said during a public speech at the World Economic Forum last May that a prolonged conflict in Ukraine will allow Russians and Chinese to build an alliance that will have grave consequences for the West. That alliance is now a reality. To quote President Xi of China during his recent visit to Russia, when he said to Vladimir Putin, right now there are changes, the likes of which we haven't seen for 100 years, and we are the ones driving these changes together. The West saw it as a bluster, but many would consider these words to be the genesis of the new global order. The Ukraine issue has given Chinese leadership an opportunity to approach Taiwan issue in a new way. President Xi's unprecedented third term is intended to boost his image as a global leader and is taking careful steps to strengthen that image. In fact, in years to come, the Russia-China-Iran axis will provide an alternative path for Xi to become the great leader that Sun Tzu had in mind. Dominoes are already beginning to fall.
Please conclude your opening statement.
Thank you. Finally, until Taiwan becomes a global, will Taiwan become a global flashpoint? Some experts say it could be in 2024 when both American and Taiwanese presidential elections are taking place. Others say it could be 2025, which is what the Air Force Mobility Command's General Minahan and the Defense Minister of Taiwan have said. Others yet feel it could be 2027 when the 21st Communist Party leadership will continue for term. Thank you.
Exceeded your time. We go on to the discussion part, and I will start with a question to Professor Sen Nieh. Professor Sen Nieh, you mentioned that you visited Taiwan for a period of 3 months and everything, life was going as usual. Everybody was calm, economic activity was going on fine. But as we speak, under Operation Joint Sword, 42 fighter planes flew across the Taiwan Strait. Chinese aircraft carrier Shandong is in Taiwanese Strait. There are 8 other Chinese vessels, and Operation Joint Sword aims to encircle Taiwan from all the 4 sides. What is the perception of Taiwanese diaspora, mainly Taiwanese Americans? Is it at variance from people in China, as you said that they were very calm? Or Taiwanese American community believes that President Xi Jinping will end up doing what he has been saying, unifying Taiwan with the mainland with the use of force?
Okay. Yeah, I've been asked by my friends in the United States, whenever I return from Taiwan, they worry about the war. What I said is what I observed. Okay. the business as usual. The society, the people are very prosperous. Nobody liked the PLA. It's annoying or just surrounding the island of Taiwan. Personally, I believe they are bluffing. They are just China has so many problems themselves, economies, social unrest, and political power struggles, and they have a bunch of headache themselves. For example, recently there's the fifth wave of escape from people of China. For instance, the southern border of United States, the refugees, the Chinese going through the southern border refugee to the United States has increased 10 times in the last few months. Okay, everybody in the way to vote by lakes or by others to leave China. Many Chinese people in the past 16 years like awakened to the truth of deceptions and the evil natures of CCP and frustration from their day-to-day experience. There have been more than 410 million courageous Chinese cut the tie with and withdraw from the communist organizations. In the past 16 years, one withdraw every 2 seconds. Okay, so the social unrest and the winding down economy inside China, which was not known better to the outside world, are causing the problems. I think Xi Jinping and CCP is apparently worried about the collapsing economy and huge social unrest.
Thank you, Professor.
And not ready in the good condition to invade Taiwan this time.
Thank you, Professor Nieh. My next question goes to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador Kapoor, recently, General Miley, the chief of the Joint Staff, in a recent interview with Kevin Barron, executive editor of Defense One, stated, overheated talk about China-US conflict is not productive. China does not have the capability to invade Taiwan, quote unquote, lower the rhetoric on China. We are not on brink of war with China, and Taiwan is not easy to conquer. Do you agree with General Miley on both these counts?
Well, frankly, I do not agree with him at all. General Miley is way off the mark in his comments. The situation is currently very fraught. If you do not take the situation seriously and take steps to bring it under control, it is only going to get worse. So to say that this is overheated talk, to say that China does not have the capacity, a country with 1.4 billion people, the second largest populated country in the world after India, and a country with the largest standing army in the world, and its capabilities in the naval domain, in the other domains having increased significantly over the last few years, and the ruthlessness which is apparent in all its actions for the last so many centuries, but has only become more ruthless and aggressive since 1949, since the takeover of the communists in China and the driving away of the nationalists. The numbers of events since that time, if I have to list here, it is an endless list of the ruthless massacres, the genocides, the cultural revolution, the people who died is in tens of millions. It's more than, according to various estimates, between 100 million to 200 million people who have died in the last 75 years in China, in famines, in massacres, in Tiananmen Square protests, in Tibetan uprisings, in land reforms, in the 3 anti and the 5 anti campaigns, in Xinjiang, in Urumqi, in all the theaters inside China. Now, if a regime is capable of all that, and on the external borders, you have China having problems with all its neighbors practically. There's hardly a single neighbor with which it does not have very serious problems. On the South China Seas, it has problems, territorial claims, island claims with Vietnam, with Taiwan itself, with South Korea, with Japan, with Philippines, with Russia, and other countries of the ASEAN. On the India border, the land border with India, there are serious problems which we all know about.
So,
So a country which has taken all these steps and actions in the last so many years, to say that if the world does not unify and take this question seriously today, that it will sort itself out, it will just vanish from the screens. I mean, that is wishful thinking. That is absolutely crazy dreams. You have to take it head on. You have to think about it every day. You have to see what are the solutions. You have to see how to find peace in the Ukraine-Russia conflict so that the world attention can then focus on Taiwan. Taiwan, as one of our speakers said, if Taiwan falls, then what is to stop the Chinese war machinery from going berserk even more?
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. You have given a fitting reply to General Miley's observations, and we agree with you. And my next question is to Dr. Vijay Sazawal. When Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August of 2022, China did show of force. 71 fighter planes went through the Taiwan Strait. As President Tsai Ing-wen, on her visit to South America, stopped en route in United States and had a meeting with Speaker Kevin McCarthy, China is again showing show of force. Should the United States government get cowed down by Chinese belligerence and Chinese rhetoric, or do some sort of signaling by maybe in future having a photo op or a bilateral meeting between President Biden and President Tsai Ing-wen? What are your views on that? You are muted, sir.
These are all postures which are essentially don't really have a significant, significant have any significance other than the optics of having shown that there is a sort of a dissatisfaction or unhappiness with what's going on. The reality is that China is preparing for takeover of Taiwan. And the question now is two questions. One is when, and the other one is how. My own assessment is Chinese would like to do it without fighting. You may not want to think about it, but actually Chinese would like to do it without fighting if it's possible. Now, that may not be possible.
As well, you answered the question. We don't want to, pre-conclude the discussion, but you have answered the question that photo ops will not matter. There's need for some substantial action. I will invite Dr. Alan Yang for the next question. While President Tsai was visiting, just prior to that, there was a visit by KMTs and former President Ma Ying-jeou to mainland China. While visiting mainland China, President Ma Ying-jeou said that both sides of the strait are Yan Huan descendants and talked about superiority and oneness of Chinese race. That kind of rhetoric, while President Tsai is visiting abroad, Does that embolden communist China and CCP and Xi Jinping? What is your view, and what is the view of Taiwanese citizens about their former president trying to squander Taiwanese sovereignty on foreign soil? Dr. Yang.
Okay, thank you for this very insightful question. I would say China is keen to actively and deliberatively weaponize the economic interdependence between Taiwan and China to pressure Taiwan, such as disrupting Taiwan's social stability and infiltrating Taiwan with sharp power. And in addition, according to your question, my answer is Beijing is very good at using the nationalism to win over its support in Taiwan and using this kind of elusive Chinese dreams to create a common vision and a united front. As you just mentioned, our former President Ma Ying-jeou visited China last week at the same moment as President Tsai Ing-wen visited the US. And President Ma's nationalist remarks and failure to condemn China's military aggression and suppression over Taiwan may have the world misunderstood that the China and Taiwan have entered into reconciliation without any dispute. But the truth is, this is not the case. As a citizen of Taiwan, President Ma's visit shows that Taiwan's democratic society is very diverse and divided. I will say it's related to the domestic politics, and also this also makes it easier for the authoritarianism to divide and conquer Taiwanese society. I think President Ma's visit is at this moment is inappropriate, and
Thank you, Dr. Yang.
he was the president. He should be paying much attention to what he responded and what he made remarks in China.
Okay, thank you. My next question is to Professor Sen Nieh. Professor Nieh, the last time His Holiness Dalai Lama visited Taiwan was in 2009. In more recent years, Taiwanese government has shown reluctance under Communist Chinese parties pressure to allow His Holiness to visit Taiwan. In 2022, His Holiness Dalai Lama said that he was willing to visit Taiwan again whenever possible, adding that he hopes Taiwan could change China, quote unquote, through the power of democracy and freedom. Is it this reluctance on part of Taiwan to host His Holiness Dalai Lama a weakness or geopolitical short-sightedness? Professor Sen Nieh.
Well, this probably Dr. Yang can answer that better, but I'll try it. I think Dalai Lama is very respectable. If there's some reservations of his visit, it is little to do with Dalai Lama. It's to do with communists in China. This is a big, bad scoundrel guy, which hurts Chinese people. Then it is not. It happens many times that even in the United States too. Okay, it's they try to see what this bad guys think and do, and try to not to offend provocative to CCP. So it's personally, I like to see the diversity of democracy in Taiwan can embrace all different race of Chinese, including Huns. Okay, this is Taiwan Republic of China. different countries of CCP. And CCP cannot represent China either. Okay, this is many Chinese people think. So it's better to embrace Chinese people against the CCP.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nee. My next question goes to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. And Ambassador Kapoor, you were very explicit in China or communist China posing threat to Taiwan and to the global international order should Taiwan were to fall. Recently, Chinese vessels cut down fiber optic cables providing internet access to Matsu Islands that are controlled by Republic of Taiwan. Should Republic of China, Taiwan, file a case in the International Court of Justice against this hostile and provocative act by People's Republic of China, just
Well,
like Philippines did with PCA?
I guess Taiwan is faced with a very difficult and a very sensitive situation. The infringements of Taiwanese sovereignty are happening on a daily basis. You know, crossing the median line, checking Taiwanese vessels, stopping them, harassing the US Navy vessels near Taiwan, harassing the US Air Force aircraft which are flying in that area. A lot of such actions are taking place on a daily basis. The effort is, I guess, to create two distinct reactions. First aspect is to slowly nibble away at the feeling of independence and autonomy and sovereignty of Taiwan, and by slowly trying to take over peripheral territory of islands of Taiwan, which are beyond the main island of Taiwan. That is the first step. The second step is to drive fear into the Taiwanese minds and souls as to the capacity of Taiwan to react is not infinite if the world does not come together to support Taiwan very strongly. So that sort of fear, once it starts creeping in, and then you have actions taken by people within Taiwan, such as President Ma, who visited Beijing and had talks with President Xi. So those sort of people from within Taiwan who then sort of cross over to the other side of reunification and capitulating to Chinese demands are going to be very serious threats to the continuation of Taiwan as an independent country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. My next question goes to Mr. Vijay Sazwal. Since 1979, when United States government recognized People's Republic of China and withdrew the recognition of Republic of China, Taiwan, United States government has taken the policy of strategic ambiguity. More recently, President Biden said that in case of invasion of Taiwan, United States will militarily support Taiwan. But White House actually walked back that statement. In your opinion, has the time come for United States government to call the Chinese bluff about the so-called one China policy? Because United States has never agreed. It has already only made a note of China's assertion of so-called one China policy. Should United States government now state that they never recognized the PRC claim over the islands of Taiwan, Kinmen, Penghu, and Matsu?
Thank you. Well, they could. There are certainly elements within the U.S. Security establishment and even the political sides that, especially the Republican side, that do say that should be done. But on the other hand, there are also those that are completely convinced that the United States is ill-advised to actually have boots on the ground in that theater for any particular reason. So you have actually a very contradictory situation within the U.S. establishment on what should be the way forward. Certainly, this administration, if you look at some of the statements that the spokesperson, Mr. Kirby, has made in corrections to some of the things that have been said about Taiwan-U.S. relations, he has been very clear that, don't get excited. We do actually believe in two-China policy, and so what I'm saying is there is a section of the political side, especially from the Democratic Party side, which is very, he wants to keep it ambivalent. And I think at the end of the day, they really will not like to see boots on the ground, American boots on the ground. While as the other side is actually very keen to see us making a much clearer definition on, the two countries, these two being two separate countries. So I don't think that debate has really gone to a position where you can say one side is better than the other or is leading over the other. My contention is, though, that it's very likely that United States will not commit boots on the ground in Taiwan when that time comes.
Thank you, Dr. Sazwal. My next question goes to Dr. Alan Yang. Since Republic of China lost the United Nations membership and the seat on Security Council, Communist China has been isolating Taiwan internationally. It has not left any opportunity without exploiting and without trying to exclude Taiwan either from WHO or from any other international forum, including Olympics, where where Republic of Taiwan is supposed to participate as quote unquote Chinese Taipei. Doesn't Taiwan need to do much more international outreach and refurbish its image as a modern democratic nation that does not support its imperialistic past? Should Taiwan not take a posture on Communist Party's occupation of an independent country called Tibet? Is ROC Taiwan willing to recognize the provisional government of Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamshala?
Thank you for your question. Before my answer kickoff, I would like to reply that we are facing the military pressure imposed by China. And there are a lot of rumors showing the timeline and also the timetable for invasion in the near future, including the previous speaker just mentioned, 2024, 2025, 2027, and even before Xi Jinping's fourth term. So those are rumors, but Taiwan has been working very hard to be well prepared. And as you just mentioned, the UN seat of Taiwan, of the Republic of China, has been replaced by PRC. And after that, Beijing advocated the UN Resolution 2758 and falsely and distort the real meaning of this resolution. It's not related to the Taiwan sovereignty, and it's about the UN seat. So with that false image spread by Beijing, and I would say we have been under so much pressure, but every president of Taiwan worked very hard to advocate the international outreach. Just as you mentioned, we, instead of being pressured we take a very active role and presence in international outreach. For example, President Tsai Ing-wen advocate and implement her new southbound policy, prioritize our relationship with India, with Australia, New Zealand, and 10 ASEAN countries. With that new southbound policy, we work very hard to focus on the people-to-people exchange and to implement the people-centered development project and policy to help our neighbors, and not only help our democratic partner, but to work with neighboring country. And it is also true that if Taiwan can highlight all we have as a resilient democracy, we should seek more support from our neighboring country as well as the like-minded partner, democratic partner. And that is the important gesture, strategic gesture of every leadership in Taiwan, contribute and lead this country. And yes, it is true that every discussion focus on one China policy or one China principle. I just raised an interesting analogy that how about thinking of the one Taiwan policy? So the one China policy argue that Taiwan is a part of, there is only one China and Taiwan is a part of one China. And that traces back to the international legality of the UN Resolution 2758. And how about we instead to think about a one Taiwan policy? There is only one Taiwan, which is not a province or a part of China. And also the PRC has never ruled over Taiwan for 1 day or even 10 minutes. And that is the undeniable fact.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. Would you comment about right to nationhood of Tibetan people and Chinese communist occupation of that nation?
I beg your pardon?
Occupation of the nation of Tibet by communist China.
Well, I think it's about a human right, and also the people in Tibet, they have their own right for the autonomy, and I think most of the discussion over the coercion of the PLA and also coercion of Beijing over like Xinjiang, like Tibet, and like Taiwan should be those coercion should be condemned.
Thank you, Dr. Yang, for very, very important statement you made on an international platform, possibly for the first time. My next question goes to Professor Sen Nieh. Sen Nieh, the Communist Party of China has been harping on the so-called 1992 consensus. Is there a consensus, A, amongst Taiwanese citizens, and B, amongst the Taiwanese diaspora about existence of any so-called 1992 consensus? Can you educate us on that?
Well, can you ask one more time? Sorry, I couldn't get the whole thing.
The Communist Party of China has been talking about something called 1992 consensus between China and Taiwan about one China across both sides of Taiwanese straits. What is the consensus amongst Taiwanese citizens, number one, and amongst Taiwanese diaspora, specifically Taiwanese Americans, about this so-called 1992 consensus, which Communist Party of China keeps on harping about?
Okay, I'm simply overseas Chinese American from Taiwan. That's my personal opinion. The it's very complex issued about seeking independence, which I sympathize of Taiwan. But one of the main reasons is the CCP has been very bad, record high, it's very bad to its own people, not only Uyghurs in Xinjiang, Tibetans, Hong Kongs, and Taiwans, it's even to the Han's people in many political movements, including 100 million Falun Gong practitioners, which are mainly Hans. So because of that, nobody wants to be under communism. So people are leaving, people are escaping as the best they can. So that is at least one of the reasons of seeking independence, leaving China, so leaving communist ruling. If communists can be better, or another party after communist collapse, China can be friendly, embrace Chinese culture. Most people want to return. So that is the part. About 1992, consensus say just one China's and represent, interpretate yourself. That is which is former President Ma's visit mainland China and made several statements on the mainland China that China belongs to the Republic of China, not PRC. He's the president of Republic of China, Taiwan. I think instead of consensus 1992, I think there is a subtle consensus should be 1996. That'll be the first time the direct elections of presidents in Taiwan. That's the establishment of the formal democracy there. That's need to be recognized equally as 1992 consensus. Okay, after these elections, it is independent, elected, civilized society in the country, Republic of China and Taiwan. That's the status quo. As overseas Chinese, I really hope that more people, including international community, to understand the difference between CCP's ruling and Chinese people. They were poor. They need help. Okay, and just against CCP's human rights abuses and things, but don't treat enemies to Chinese people. Okay, they were suffering too.
Thank you, Professor Nieh. My next question goes to Mr. Vijay Sazawal. United States over the last 1 year has tried to put almost $100 billion in Ukraine war effort. United States government led by President Biden is trying to weaken Russia, possibly trying to do regime change in Russia. That has eventually made Russia as a junior partner of Communist China. Should United States government need to do course correction and identify that the major threat to rules-based international order, rules-based global order is coming from Communist China, its imperialistic and hegemonic intentions, and instead of focusing to weaken Russia, which is already weakened, focus on containing China?
Yes, I think, forget about, sort of a low level player like me. I think that was the gist of the message that Dr. Henry Kissinger actually gave in May of last year at the World Economic Forum, that, that you are really creating opportunities for China to capitalize and mobilize. And if they actually end up partnering with a European country like Russia, you're opening up a new can of worms. Some words to that effect. And you know what? He was ridiculed by not only Zelensky, which was expected, or by European NATO countries, but by and large by all the Western media, including in the United States. I mean, amazingly bipartisan support from Democrats and Republicans, to the point where actually he had to revise his words at the end of the second opportunity he got at the World Economic Forum, which was in December of last year. So he even retreated. I mean, this country, quite honestly, has sort of lost its reason. I think it is kind of enthralled here in terms of, the NATO has really pumped them up, and of course, you mentioned 100 billion. Actually, the number is more like 113 billion, out of which 57 billion has been delivered. And it is really not going anywhere. I mean, this a lot of it is, of course, going waste. Everybody knows that. But the reality is, it is providing China an opportunity to, quite frankly, exploit. As I said, that's how the rules of the war were played. And the United States, I think, has lost many reasons. Now, it's very interesting. I was told that one of the key players in this business is Antony Blinken, who has really emerged as a principal advisor to the president. President's capabilities are kind of debatable right now, given the different things you hear about his health. But the fact is, Tony Blinken actually has a vested interest. His great grandfather was born in the same village where Zelensky was born in central Ukraine. They come from basically the same heritage stock. And his father, Donald Blinken, was an architect of getting Eastern Europe into NATO. He himself stayed with Hungary as an ambassador and brought Hungary into NATO. So the dutiful son is actually creating the legacy, completing the legacy of his father. But in the process, I think they have lost the sense that the enemy is really much more looming on the bigger, and we are every day, every penny we spend, every weapon we use in Ukraine, quite frankly, is only getting us weaker in terms of what the Chinese capability relatively will increase. So indeed, very much indeed, the Americans have a very misplaced sense of where their priorities should be. There are some politicians and actually most professors. What I noticed, I've been crisscrossing reading the most of the political
Thank you,
professors in
Dr.
this
Sazawal.
country.
You have answered the question very, very
Yeah,
explicitly.
they all agree that current policy is in error and needs a course correction. Thank you.
Taking from this and discussing further the imperialistic and hegemonic intentions of communist China, which derives its claim on South China Sea from the so-called 9-dash line, which is supported by Republic of China, Taiwan. Would Republic of China, Taiwan, or if I may say, Republic of Taiwan as an independent sovereign nation, recognize the International Tribunal Permanent Court of Arbitration 2016 ruling vis-a-vis PRC's claim on Scarborough Shoal? What would be Taiwan's stance on that?
You're asking a question to whom?
You're asking
The question is to Dr. Yang.
Regarding this 9-dash line issue, I would say it's a legacy from the internal war and also different political interpretation over the constitution and also our territory. But my remark will be only on my personal capacity. I would say the current administration is very pragmatic. The key takeaway of Taiwan's claim over the South China Sea issue is to prioritize the international norm and international law instead of the only emphasis on the historical claim that is related to China PRC's historical claim. I would say this administration is very, very pragmatic. First, to emphasize the priority of the international norm, international rule and law. And secondly, Taiwan is open to any discussion over the resource development and joint development issue, as well as the key development policy development issue in South China Sea. And we will be ready to take part in any track 1, track 2 discussion along with the key claimant and also the stakeholder. We would like to call upon not being excluded. We are the claimant and also have the territorial right over some like Taiping Island, Itu Apa Island in the Spratly area. And the current government also pay much attention to some key issues such as environmental protection, as well as the humanitarian relief, HADR. And those are the critical issues facing among the key neighboring countries in the South China Sea. Instead of increasing or escalating the military tension, Taiwan not like China to produce or manufacture the artificial island. However, we are very responsible to contribute to the peace, prosperity, and the stability of this South China Sea issue. And we welcome any constructive partnership and dialogue regarding these troubled waters.
Thank you, Dr. Yang, for your individual personal views, which are highly pragmatic and not bound by the shackles of historical claims. My next question goes to Professor Sen Nieh. Professor Sen Nieh, you mentioned about large number of immigrants from communist China coming to the southern border of United States seeking asylum. In the same vein, should the government of Republic of Taiwan take a very high moral ground on religious freedom and encourage the followers of the Falun Gong tradition from the mainland to migrate to Taiwan. In a sense, offer them open-ended political asylum so that there is a constant stream of refugees from the mainland to Taiwan.
Well, this is a very good question, sir. Wishful thinking is, yes, I think Taiwan Republic of China has done very good to support those suppressed group, Hong Kong's, Tibet's, Xinjiang, and Falun Gongs, and law attorneys in the past. But we like to see that more to at least demonstrate there's a big difference across Taiwan Strait. One, respect and embrace human rights, freedoms, and democracy, rule of law. The other one is destroy them. But practically speaking, Taiwan is very crowded. So it's it practically probably cannot take a huge number of people to the island. Yeah, which is very understandable. But I think it's from overseas Chinese Americans from Taiwan's point of view, we like to see more clear moral support, spiritual support to support the religious freedoms, against religious persecution, support the human rights. Practically, that it may not be very fair to people living in Taiwan. It's very crowded already.
Thank you, Professor Nieh. Dr. Yang wants to join on this particular issue, so I would allow him to give a response.
Thank you very much. My very brief remark is, if China is that benign, there will be no more refugee flow from China, the mainland, to neighboring countries, including Taiwan or Vietnam or other places nearby. So the Chinese government should be very responsive for taking good care of its people. If they really take good care, if they really take these people for granted as their citizen. This is my very quick comment.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. My next question is to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Any future Indo-Pacific framework, security framework, must include recognition of a sovereign, democratic nation of Taiwan. Should there be a grand bargain by which all the ASEAN countries, Japan, and Indo-Pacific powers like Quad recognize Taiwan as an independent nation, in a sense, one Taiwan, one China, in return for Taiwan renouncing its claims on Senkaku Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and the Nine Dash Line, and in the Western Philippine Sea, aka Northern Natuna Sea, or so-called South China Sea. So a geopolitical grand bargain guaranteeing the security and sovereignty of island of Taiwan, and in exchange, Republic of Taiwan making concessions, permanently foregoing so-called Nine Dash Line, Scarborough Shoals, and Senkaku Islands. Yes, like Dr. Yang said, that they would like to keep the Taiping Island, which is fine, but should there be a grand bargain to avoid Third World War?
That is a very interesting question indeed. And what I would like to say is that, first of all, Taiwan needs to change its nomenclature on international platforms from Republic of China, Taiwan to just Taiwan or Republic of Taiwan. Because currently, like, even Chinese nationals are confused. One of the Chinese nationals participating in this talk is calling Taiwan as PRC, whereas the whole world knows PRC is referred to mainland China. So to that extent, the nomenclature, the name itself needs to be changed. The population of Taiwan is just about 23 or 24 million people. Now, it's already an overpopulated island. The actions which are being taken by mainland China, including sanctions on the Taiwanese ambassador and his family in the US, sanctions on the Reagan Presidential Library on the West Coast, sanctions on the Hudson Institute by the Chinese government, and pressurizing all the countries which have diplomatic relations with Taiwan to sort of de-recognize Taiwan. So that is a very serious situation for Taiwan to confront. Now, if it were to be faced with the possibility of a grand bargain, like you say, of giving up its territorial claims on other islands, I do not know whether that would fetch it permanent peace, permanent existence as a sovereign country without interference from mainland China, because China's track record on global pacts is very dubious, as we have seen, even on the judgment on Philippines and China, that dispute over the island, where it was awarded to Philippines very clearly by the International Court of Justice, but China refused to accept that decision and the judgment. So how do you get China in the first instance to agree to recognize the existence of Taiwan as an independent sovereign country is most important. And that can only happen if there is a global effort for peace in the Ukraine-Russia theater, and NATO stops its expansions towards Russian borders and enters into sort of discussions and negotiations and partnership with Russia itself as a NATO-Russia partnership in any shape or form, which diminishes the further threats in the European theater, threat of wars in the European theater. And then the full focus of the world is brought to the Taiwan-China theater. And then the world insists on peace in that theater through whatever means it has at its disposal. That is what is required for any such effort to work to some extent, if at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. Dr. Yang wants to join, so I would yield the floor to Dr. Yang.
I think Ambassador Pradeep is very insightful for this remark. However, we in Taiwan are facing a serious challenge. In addition to the threatening Taiwan military, Beijing also continued to use the gray zone area tactic to interfere with Taiwan. I would like to share some numbers. In 2020, Taiwan's ADIZ was invaded by a total of 380 times of PLA fighter jets. In 2021, it reached to 960 times, while in 2022, it existed more than 1,700 times. And Ambassador is right, to change the naming issue is very important for Taiwan and to make us distinguished from China. However, as we have been continuously facing those military threat and also the interference into our ADIZ, and also they try to exhaust Taiwan's Air Force and warm out our defense capability, and at the same time make these interferences normalized and become a manufactured fact. How can we easily change our name under such political pressure? I think this is something that I would like to add as a footnote.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. My next question goes to Professor Sen Nieh. You mentioned that Taiwan is already overcrowded with 24 million people on a small island, but out of those 24 million people, 5,000 are US citizens. In case of communist-controlled Chinese government invading, hypothetically, whether it happens in 2027, 2028, because they are committed to it, does the United States government have, under UN Charter, R2P obligations, responsibility to protect the US citizens who are resident of Taiwan Island and join the hostilities militarily in case communist China were to invade Taiwan? Any viewpoints?
Yes. So whether and when the CCP will launch the military invasion to Taiwan, it's a complex phenomena. It's also heavily depending on its decade-long rival with the United States and the free world. Taiwan, it's not only with many pro-US people, okay, because Taiwan recognizes dual citizenship, and Taiwan itself, it's at the strategic locations in Southeast Asia against the infiltration and expansion of CCP, the so-called the first chain of islands. So US, Japan, Korea's Asian countries, and Australia's were concerned on their own benefits of the military invasions to Taiwan, okay? And also concerned with the benefit of Taiwan itself. So, but personally, I believe U.S. will stand back, will back up Taiwan, okay, against military invasions, and I hope it's not happening. But at least I know it's not going to happen in the next 3 years, that China has serious problem themselves within that. Whether CCP can ruin Chinese people is questionable. Okay, at that time. So I believe and also hope U.S., Japan, the free world would back up Taiwan to keep a clear comparisons between Taiwan Strait, what is communist, okay, brutal ruling against free democratic systems in Taiwan.
Thank you, Professor Nee. My last question goes to Mr. Vijay Sazawal. There is some recent talk about enlarging the AUKUS to include New Zealand. Would you suggest it to the Biden administration to also include Taiwan and India as part of the AUKUS?
Thank you. Yes, I would definitely do so. I obviously very clear that they will not agree to probably the latter, being Taiwan, given that their policy overall has not changed from the one China policy they have. But it's very interesting you mentioned this because there are a lot of people who are saying that India will be put to a test next year when it takes over as the leader or the host leader of the Quad, and that actually there may be opportunities there where sort of Indian relationship with Russia, Indian relationship with Taiwan, other countries will be tested. So yes, I would going back to your question. I would certainly recommend that, but I sense it will have to be figured out in some way, knowing that the Americans are hesitant at this time to come out of the policy they have. In fact, I was just looking at the statement that Mr. John Kirby made on the president's visit to, the current Taiwanese president's visit to the United States and meeting with our House Speaker in California, and it's very interesting. It's a very short statement. I'll tell you what he says. He said, United States responded to by saying that China should not use the stopover as a pretext to step up any aggressive activity around the Taiwan Straits. Then he goes on to say there is no reason for them to react forcibly. That is Chinese. The White House National Security Advisor John Kirby told reporters, this transit is consistent with our long-standing artificial relationship with Taiwan, and it is consistent with the United States' one China policy, which remains unchanged. Look at his words. This policy is consistent with our long-standing artificial relationship with Taiwan, and is consistent with the United States one China policy. That was John Kirby, the national spokesman for the National Security Advisor, White House spokesman for National Security Advisor. So I'm not sure, quite frankly, this administration has the might and the muscle to essentially do that kind of thing. They seem to be stuck on Russia, very much so, committed to Russia without much of a reason. But as much as that, they seem to be soft when it comes to looking at the Eastern theater.
Thank you, Dr. Sazwal. Unfortunately, we have run over our time, so we are going to forego the closing statements as well as questions from the audience, but we will collate all the questions from the audience and have a follow-up offline for those questions because we take them very seriously. Unfortunately, the time has run out. This was a very productive, very fruitful discussion with, people speaking pragmatically, accepting the newer contemporary realities, foregoing the past, and willing to move on for peace and prosperous international community. My heartfelt thanks to our distinguished panelists, Professor Sen Nieh, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, Dr. Alan Yang, and Mr. Vijay Sazawal. My also thanks to our audience members who, listened to this discussion over 1.5 hours. And lastly, my heartfelt thanks to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, Mr. Rajiv Verma, Mr. Ankush Bhandari, and Mr. Amod Desai, who helped me arrange these programs. With that, we are going to close this session. We hope that we have more opportunities to have formal, informal discussions because this is an important issue. A democratic nation of 24 million people cannot be bamboozled by a communist dictatorship. And that's the reality that international community has to realize, wake up, and re-strategize and reprioritize the issues at this point in time. Thank you very much, everyone. And we are going to close the session.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.